Welcome to Behind the Curtain Finance. My name is Thomas Manetta. We have a very, very special guest today. Jason Wenk is the CEO and founder of Altruist, the first ever custodian that is built intentionally from the ground up to support independent financial advisors who are trying to do the best thing possible for their clients with as little conflicts as possible. Jason, this is a real thrill for me. I can't thank you enough. And again, thank you for building Altruist, and thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure. And as I've said, kind of off camera, off recording, really appreciate the support. What we do is, only possible if we have advisors that share the same ethos. So they want that same better outcome for their clients. They're forward thinking, and early adopters, to things that they think will allow them to get there. So you've always been a great supporter for me and for Altruist. So thank you. And it's awesome to be here. Let's have a super fun conversation.
Let's do it. I listened to a couple times. There are two recent podcasts, one with Michael Batnick and one with Dave Zoller, and I'd like to try to pick up where they left off. And I think the best way to do that is to begin with a discussion around API. And I wasn't sure what API was. I have a client who's in software sales, and he said, think about all the software that you have as electricity. And it's just, we're passing it between each other. And the API is basically the electrical outlet. And if you don't have the right electrical outlet, it can't pass. And so a lot of legacy firms have layered their API on top of each other, and they have, different outlets that aren't necessarily connecting. Whereas with you have built the infrastructure of Altruist, and I'll let you explain it in more detail, is vertically integrated. It's set up to be vertically integrated. Can you tell us what that means? And what does that eventually mean in terms of the advisor experience 18 to 24 months out, and by extension, the client experience?
Sure. Yeah. Good metaphor too from your client. I think, if we think about the way that software has been developed for the last, it's probably 80 years, actually going back to some of the earliest, mainframes. There's obviously been like these, really big, massive sort of leaps of evolution in terms of how software is developed. And most of the financial services infrastructure, like the core infrastructure, is built on mainframes. So it's literally a singular database of code. And oftentimes it's going to be in a language that is rarely even taught in college anymore. So it could be COBOL, could be Fortran. I mean, it's going to be 30, 40, 50-year-old kind of code bases. And they've been maintained really well. They're incredibly stable. So a lot of really large financial institutions, once they have tens of millions of clients and client accounts, and they're just doing billions of transactions, changing from whatever they were originally architected on is somewhere in between impossible and just highly impractical. Now, as software evolved, you started to move into cloud-based architecture. This allowed applications, instead of running on your desktop, to run virtually, and internet was a big enabler of this. And so companies had to figure out how are they going to take their old mainframe software, which was not designed to work on an internet. They were designed more at best an intranet, and then make them accessible. And this was a real challenge. It's partly why, again, even many major financial institutions, when you're using their applications, you kind of go, gosh, why does this feel like it's so old? And the answer is because it is old. And it's actually really hard to kind of like add in different modern components that were maybe built in the last 20 years on top of something that at its core is 50 or 60 or 70 years old. Right. So one of the big benefits to building a company today is that we don't have any of that legacy infrastructure. We were able to build just in, the most modern, type of cloud architecture. In our case, it's going to be a collection of services. People will call these sometimes microservices. And these services, they talk to each other through APIs, which is an application program interface. And in many cases, there's even like a layer in between these. It's called a BFF, back end to front end, because your back end is doing some work, your front end is doing other work, and you want these things to be really, really seamless. And the most modern kind of way, actually, there was a while where people were building almost too many of these microservices. And now it's actually like, what's the right number of services? Again, all, cloud hosted, API connected to deliver a really elegant, fast, secure experience for clients, right? So Altruist, we started building our platform in 2019.
Mhm.
We've been about 100 different kind of microservices that connect. And so that's kind of the architecture backstory, a little bit nerdy for those who don't like
Yeah.
computer science,
You
but
you took a lot of
it's yeah,
inspiration from you took inspiration from Robinhood and in a
some, yeah.
way, or maybe it accelerated what you were already planning.
No, totally. I think some have heard me tell the story that, ultimately watching Robinhood was really one of the things that it was like the hair that broke the camel's back for me. And, basically the way that story would go is that you could open an account if you're 18 years old on your phone in under 2 minutes, put $20 in it, and then buy
Right.
$20 worth of a stock that normally is $500 a share. And you could do it
Yeah.
commission free. And a financial advisor, if they wanted to open an account for a client, they'd have to go to a form center, download some forms, fill out a bunch of PDFs, send those to their clients for DocuSign. Maybe they'd have to get some wedding signatures. Maybe they'd have to get medallion stamp signature guarantees. Like there's
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
these things.
Yep. I
And this
remember.
process could take it could take
Yeah.
weeks or month and a half, right? So I think it was one of these things where I'm like, this is insane, right? That like the infrastructure that advisors are using is so far behind. So we wanted to build this like modern, fast, secure advisor to client kind of platform. And this kind of just to touch on what you mentioned about vertical integration, I think it's a kind of sounds like a buzzword, and maybe people don't know precisely what that means, but effectively, like the name sort of gives you a visual. So vertical integration, you have like your core software infrastructure layer, and
Hmm.
then you start adding new services on top of it, right? So in our world, for financial advisors, it might be your core custody and clearing is the base, right? So it's the account opening, money movement, things like that. Then there's all these other things that in the past you had to go and find third party, companies to do, which doesn't make a ton of sense, especially if all your data and your ability to process things in real time exists at that clearing and custody layer. So why not build things like native performance reporting?
Hmm.
No one should have to log into a separate system from their custodian if a client has a very simple question like, "Hey, how am I doing so far this year?" Across all
Yeah.
of my accounts. Actually, how am I doing this year just on my retirement accounts, but all three of my retirement accounts, right? And like those are
Hmm.
things a traditional custodian actually couldn't answer. You'd have to pipe your data
Through
over
it.
to a
Yep.
third party. They'd
Yep.
reconcile all the transactions, produce a report. Occasionally, it would be wrong because there was some miscommunication in the reconciliation process.
Right.
This just all seemed, again, in first principles, you'd go, why would you
Why?
ever build something that way? So we just, kept building, layer after layer. So performance reporting, fee billing, trading and rebalancing, like just a lot of this functionality. And, we'll keep going. Like we'll continue to add more layers. Each one of those ends up producing a lot better efficiency for advisors, which can then, metastasize into better outcomes for their clients.
What does model context protocol mean, and why do you have it and others don't?
Well, we don't do it publicly, I should say. So MCP is used often in AI systems and AI engineering.
Hmm.
Basically, it's sort of like how you would enable access to your data and your platform, to an AI agent, right?
Great.
So the concept
Great.
would be like imagine you want to tell your AI agent to book your travel. In order for them to actually book the travel on most sites, like Travelocity or Hotels.com or Delta or whatever,
Hmm.
those platforms would need to support model context protocol. I think Anthropic was kind of who really led the charge on this. They just felt like, hey, like we can only take AI agents so far, unless we kind of enable them to actually do things on behalf of the user. They're doing a lot of work around that with browsers. I think even Perplexity is doing a lot of work on that with browsers as well. And so, the notion here is that your agent says, like, let's make it a financial service example.
Yep.
Hey, Thomas, you've got 7 clients that need to take the required minimum distribution before the end of
Hmm.
the year. It's December 20th. Would you like us to go ahead and queue those up and send the approvals to your clients? If the advisor says yes, this allows the agent to go actually hit the like Altruist APIs effectively, take the retirement accounts, do the calculation how much the RMDs would be, prepare a message that goes out to the clients, and then also even a link for the clients to click on to approve, yes, this looks okay, go ahead and process this, do the withholding, send the money to whatever account I want to go to. And in theory, all the advisor had to do was say, yes, do that work for me, instead of the way other AI systems might work. If your custodian, like in our case, does not allow for models to actually work within the context of our broader API stack, all they could do is tell you, hey, here's your clients that have the RMDs. Want us
Go
to put
ahead,
it
do it.
want us to put a to-do list for you then to go do it yourself. Like
Right,
that's what
right.
most other AIs would do. If you have MCP or even just like the right permissioning for an internal tool, you can actually straight through process things after that human review.
Okay, this is where it gets really exciting. So let's say in 18 to 24 months, we have, you've all this stuff is integrated at the custodial level, and you've introduced not just Hazel, but the paraplanner, the agentic agents. Maybe there's more, but those two. And so, an advisor can leverage the paraplanner, who, as you touched on with Dave Zoller, they can train. Is that right? So they can actually train it, much like you kind of train Chat GPT, I guess. That kind of, does that make sense? And then they have someone that can actually, that kind of sounds like them or can act on their behalf, and not only do the administrative tasks, but they're actually maybe coming up with recommendations or ideas. That seems to be a solution where a solo advisor could manage a much bigger book of business. Am I wrong to assume that?
No, not at all. Yeah, I think so. So yeah, kind of like rewinding and kind of just validating a few of those things. The um, so the training component, absolutely. Like the way that AI systems work is oftentimes via reinforced learning. So that's why I think there's this saying that the AI you use today is the dumbest version it'll ever be. Like it'll only get better as time goes on, and we've seen this even in the last 2 years where it was novel and kind of a fun parlor trick to kind of go ask GPT to do something. Sometimes it would be wildly wrong. We'd laugh at it, and now it's in that neighborhood of like a probably 130 140 IQ, at least in some areas it might even be more like 150 160 IQ, but broadly not to super intelligence yet, but like not terribly far off from being uh, like 99th percentile across almost every form of sort of like academics, whether it be physics, mathematics, literature, et cetera, right? Now it's still wrong sometimes, but like it's quite good,
Right.
and it'll get better and better. And part of what gets it better is when it's wrong. So if it's wrong and we correct it,
Mm-hmm.
that reinforced learning loop will help with training the model, providing more context to the model. This is very similar to how Tesla self-driving works. If people have ever
Yeah.
used self-driving in a Tesla before, it tries to drive the car, but it tells you to still be aware. If you, as the driver, see, oh, it shouldn't be in this lane, and you do a takeover, it recognizes that takeover. Actually, the AI actually is writing the software for self-driving, so it's like recognizing all the takeovers, and it's sort of yeah, uh, putting in whatever it might be, tens of millions of drivers across billions of hours on the road. And so presumably, many billions of takeovers are reinforcing the model. So when
Mm-hmm.
it rewrites its new software for self-driving, it's a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, replicating effectively the best drivers on the road. Oftentimes it's going to actually give deference to drivers that have a higher driver score. So those who don't know how Tesla works, it actually rates your score when you drive it yourself. Do
Mm-hmm.
you tailgate? Do you hit the brakes hard? Do you speed? Do you take corners too fast? Do you run red lights? Right? Like those things reduce your driver score. So the better the driver you are, the more your takeovers will influence the rewrite of the AI system. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So for advisors, this is really interesting. There's always going to be some of these companies out there that are going to say things like, "We're going to build something. We're going to build AI, and we're going to put all advisors out of business." And I always kind of chuckle because I'm like, you know, that'd be like saying, "We'll have never driven a car before. We're never going to observe someone driving a car ever. We frankly uh, have no idea like how to drive a car, right? But we're going to build a self-driving car, right? And we're not going to need any help from anybody, right? It's like
uh-huh.
that's kind of silly. The best AI for wealth management, financial planning, financial advice will be the ones that are actually reinforced by the best advisors.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that's really kind of key to building a killer AI system that gives advisors massive efficiency across all those vectors you mentioned
Hmm.
is that it's actually used by advisors. And because the advisors are the expert drivers, right? They're the 99 driver scores of finance. And so when they override maybe the occasional, oh, that's not actually how I want this allocation to be done, or that's not the precise way I want these taxes to be, tax losses to be harvested.
Hmm.
Um, that's not precisely how I want to do this Roth conversion, or et cetera, et cetera. That's going to reinforce the model, make it better and better and better. Versus if someone's out there just like, I'm going to use an AI system, a general purpose model. I'm going to try to give it context the best I can to tell people what to do with their money. And I'm going to hope that people, if they catch a problem, they catch it. But like you're asking people who are like driver score 40s to catch the problems, right? Like they're
Yeah.
not the professional CFP, CFA, experience, decades of experience financial planners out there. So I think like I really do think like the absolute best way to build the best version of AI for wealth management and financial planning is it really needs to be first a B2B tool, like meaning it needs to be for advisors and their clients.
Hmm.
And man, like after a number of years, after again, hundreds of thousands of different kind of AI based recommendations, and maybe it's tens of thousands of corrections or enhancements by advisors, these models will just get better and better, right? So the loop will get really, really tight.
Okay.
And so then fast forwarding to your question around like, will single advisors be able to have the scale to, do a ton of things without hiring a bunch of people? Absolutely, because again, these AI systems will be trained by many thousands of advisors with their thousands of employees across their millions of clients, and effectively, it's not just the advisors that are using these AI systems. Like in our case with Hazel, it's entire teams, right? So it's ops teams, it's the advisor support assistant, the planners, right? The paraplanners. So all of the different agents that we build, and as they're used more and more, they'll just get better and better and better. And the 2 years from now version of them will likely look a lot like the 99th percentile across all of those job functions, right? So like,
Okay.
you'll be able to have these agents that are just like as good as the best EA, as good as the best paraplanner, as good as the best associate advisor. And that's going to enable immense like scale for people, and just also better outcomes and better client experiences.
Let me ask you about the data that's coming in when when everything's integrated and you have, on top of all that, you have these agentic assistants. Now, will there ever be a time where that data starts to talk to each other? So these different silos, your planning software, your cash management software, your tax planning, estate planning, is it possible to imagine a version of that where they're cross populating each other and creating kind of a real time net worth assessment for clients, to always know exactly how financially fit they are?
Yeah, I'd go one further. So I think
Wow.
I think the V1 is these disparate systems, talk to each other. Like that's V1, and we're seeing some of that with some of the AI assistants right now, where it's like, hey, I just had a meeting. Let me gather the data from this meeting and pump it into my financial planning software. Like, or I had a meeting and let me make sure it syncs with my CRM, right? And
Mhm.
and so this is like V 0.1, right? This isn't like advanced, but it is an advancement, right? But it's not like advanced, if you will.
Right.
Um, so what's really wild and probably highly unpopular with most software companies is that the notion of these segregated systems talking to each other will become irrelevant. In other words, the UI will be decoupled from the data. Right now, when you use a system, right, what we are interacting with is a user interface, and we're plugging in our client's information,
Yeah.
and then it takes that and it's then running it through. If it's like a financial planning software, running through its like planning algorithm. But the reality is like, once you've extracted all of that data, so imagine a world where you connect it to all of your systems, your CRM, your planning, your tax
Hmm.
plan, all these different third-party systems. You even have all of the PDFs they've ever generated, right? Like the plans they've generated historically. You have your meeting notes via your old CRM scratchpad notes. You could even photograph or OCR, like handwritten notes. Like you can take everything, right? And
Mhm.
all of that stuff can live effectively in a private database, for that advisor. And a really well trained LLM will be able to do all of the functionalities of all those separate softwares without you ever using those softwares, right? So in
Right.
other words, there won't be any real need to go like if I want to do a tax analysis, I won't need to log into a tax software to do that analysis. Like all the data will live right in
Hmm.
your kind of private, you know, yeah, private, whatever AWS Bedrock instance or something, right? So it's yours, it's your private. It's not like, at some model, right? It's not some big model company. It's yours, but now you can actually use the large model to take a look at that data, and you can just ask it to do stuff. Or again, agentically, it could just do things automatically, right? So
Right.
if you were to say all you have to do in that regard is the advisor could provide the context of what great planning looks like. So just as an example I might give is like let's just say someone says, look, for every client, here's my 20 promises that I make. I'm going to promise that I'm going to analyze their budget and make sure that we're saving everything appropriately as we can, and we're disciplined with our savings rate because savings rate is important. Step two, we're going to, maximize any tax deductions possibly available to that client. I'm going to do that for every client. Step three, I'm going to measure every form of risk. I'm going to look at their property casualty insurance. I'm going to look at their health insurance. I'm going to look at their life insurance, right? Their homeowners, like et cetera, right? So they have their list of like whatever their version of like, these are the 20 things I'm going to do for every client. And this becomes context, right? So this is like what happens when you use Chat GPT and you ask it a question. You can
Hmm.
ask it a question just like, "What's the weather today?" Or you could give context to it. I'm planning on going to the beach, and I really want to make sure I'm using the right sunscreen. And I'd like to, know if the water is going to be warm enough to swim. And if I go into the water to swim, I always like to make sure that, I know what the tides are going to be, and blah blah blah. Right. So like, so like that, all the additional, info you provide, then you can even like give it frameworks like. When you respond, I want it to be, short and quick, and give me 6 bullet points, and right. So that's context.
Hmm.
So some people will call it like prompt engineering, but this all can be saved like in the background. Like it could be a template, if you will. And you just provide that template now. And your data's there. The LLM knows the context. It goes, it does all the work, right? Automatically. No need to pipe data back and forth between these different softwares that are all using some type of, presumably, very uh, um, rigid, kind of calculations. In other words, like it's not like they're getting better every month or two or three or five or a year, right? It's like it's
Yeah.
literally, ones and zeros in terms of like how they're thinking about, kind of you input this, we run this calculation, we output this chart, right? Like so. I think that we'll come to a world where again the UI will be decoupled from the data. So you'll have your data,
Yep.
and you'll be able to ask it to whatever you want, and it will just be done. And you'll be no need to go log into all these different systems that are doing things like calculations and checking. Now actions are different. So actions, this is where like, we've been pretty thoughtful as a custodian. It's one thing to say, here's all my data, and run all these calculations, which is what most software is doing for advisors. Even if it's things like querying, hey, who are my 10 clients that have special events coming up this quarter? I want to do something really special for them. Identify the clients and recommend what I should do and make it sound really personal, right? Like even that, there's no need for an application layer, like a user interface, if you will.
Hmm.
But something like, actually trade my client's account, that does actually, like that's where like you start either needing like MCP or,
Yep.
some form of connectivity, or you need an actual application to go do certain things, right? But most of the stuff, like again, analysis, reports, all of that, within a relatively short amount of time will be largely unnecessary. I think this is why everybody's scrambling a bit here. So like if
Yeah.
you're a CRM company,
Right.
you're scrambling a bit.
Uh-huh.
If you're a software company that's kind of a monoline thing, you're probably a little bit worried about who do I connect with and who do I send my data. Because once the data's been extracted, again, like the software application itself becomes a lot less valuable and important.
So you don't,
So yeah, it'd be a
so you
crazy
don't
world.
have a need, so you won't have a need for, and I don't want to, you won't have a need for tax planning software. You won't have a need for estate planning software. You won't have a need for planning software. And,
Yeah, reasonably good
or,
chance you, yeah.
yeah. So, right. So they all will be, at a place, presumably, that has the right technology for that. Right. And Altruist has that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think so. We have a lot of work to be done. I mean, to be clear, I think
Mm-hmm.
everybody, and no one's fully there yet.
Okay.
Even those who are the, like, but some places will be there sooner, right? But I think a great example, like if you haven't, I would encourage people to look at, like, I think it's Claude for financial services. They rolled out maybe a month or so ago,
Okay.
um, and it's a really interesting because there's no uh, like application user interface. It's just a GPT. But you can ask it whatever you want. So you could say things like, "Hey, let me know, of the S&P 500, show me all of the stocks that have, met or exceeded their earnings estimates for the past 8 quarters in a row, and then build a hypothetical chart of if you invested equally in those companies, rebalanced, once a year compared to the broader S&P 500."
Mm-hmm.
And what it will do, it'll go out and it'll create all the charts. It'll do the back test. It'll create a full visualization. It's designed in a lot of respects. I don't think it's probably quite there yet, but to do a lot of the things like a Bloomberg terminal would do with no need for the terminal and no
Mm-hmm.
need for actually any software application layer whatsoever. Just a model that's been trained very rigorously on, working with financial data and producing financial outputs. And it's already in use by tons of investment analysts, hedge fund managers, mutual fund managers, consultants, and again, we have to keep in mind like that. While not perfect, this is the worst version of this we'll likely ever see.
Right.
Like every, there might be like occasional bizarre regressions, and that's probably more human error than model error. Kind of like Chat GPT 5 versus 4, there was maybe a bad rollout and bad
Yeah.
comms on it, but yeah, I think there's high likelihood that within like a couple of years, I mean, the version we see today of Claude for financial services is going to be it'll look like a joke compared to what it might look like in a couple of years.
Right.
And again, there's no need for anybody to build software applications. So our industry is always a little bit far behind on these things. We can only build so fast at Altruist. There will be others obviously building AI systems. There's some that are pretty darn good right now. And the big challenge that most folks are going to have if they're building, like an AI system is that if you're frankly, if you're not a custodian, and if most advisors, they're helping their clients with opening accounts, funding accounts, moving money around, investing, um, you know, those activities, those you'll need to find a way for your AI application to get to that layer.
Yeah.
Otherwise you'll kind of always be a productivity tool, and you'll only ever be able to create lists for advisors to then have to go manually do on some other system. And
Yeah.
and so I do think like we do need. It would be a bad thing if another custodian or two joined in the race, and started building some really really cool AI systems.
I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I have my experience. I've worked at a lot of different financial services firms, and I always felt like I was working for someone other than the end client. You have to answer to the firm that's cutting your checks, and my experience was a slow progression towards being less conflicted until I became an owner, and now I feel like I enjoy this alignment with my clients that I've never had before. I didn't realize how powerful that was going to be at first until my clients started to tell me that I was a different advisor. I was listening better. I was more present. I was more authentic. And I can't help but think that that kind of experience is something that should be replicated for everybody. And I don't think that I could have found that alignment at another custodian because Altruist is built for one purpose, and that's just to support independent advisors and their success. And my experience with the other custodians was anything but that. So, do you think that once this technology makes everything much more automated And that side of an advisor, that empathetic, authentic side, don't you think that that's going to be the most valuable thing that an advisor can offer?
Yeah, well, so first, incredibly lovely way you framed the question. So,
Mm.
yeah, thank you. So kind to be associated with such thoughtful, advisors and people in the industry. Um, yeah, the superpower, of an advisor will at some point no longer be their brain power. It'll be kind of more of their ability to connect with people and do it in a deeply personal way. Um, I listened to a podcast recently where Tim Ferriss, who
Hmm.
New York Times bestselling author and has one of the largest podcasts in the world, was on with the podcast How I Built This with Guy Raz, and they were talking about Tim's latest venture. And here's a guy who's been like early angel investor in so many companies in Silicon Valley, lives in San Francisco, really championed digital entrepreneurship, 20 plus years ago. And his latest business venture is a board game. And it's a board game that only takes 4 minutes to learn and 10 minutes to play. And his reason for doing it is, he said that, he feels like the next frontier is actually getting back to human connection, spending time in a very in a very analog world, non-digital world,
Hmm.
that's deeper than two dimensions. And he was sharing how, like, in certain cities around the country, there's these like board game nights, and thousands of people will come out to put their phones away and play
Yeah.
board games with other humans, and
Wow.
which is cool.
Yeah.
So I do think like there'll be a place where it'll be hard to wow somebody with the knowledge we have about the tax code or asset allocation, those things, because frankly we're not that far away from a general purpose LLM being able to answer pretty much any question you can throw at it with a pretty high degree of accuracy, if not, better accuracy than the mean of all professional advisors. Um, but that doesn't mean that people are going to want to go on that journey alone.
Hmm.
And I think that they're going to want to have that person that they know, like, and trust. So, absolutely, it's going to be, like, find me my kindred spirit, and I hope my kindred spirit is also armed with insanely good technology that drives the best possible outcomes for me.
Yeah.
And I can then focus on the things that matter in life. And that kindred spirit part is kind of interesting. I did practice for a number of years before I went into building software for advisors, and that was always something that came up with the handful of clients that I served. As one could probably imagine, I worked with a lot of engineers,
Yeah.
like overwhelmingly large number of engineers, a number of college professors, people with PhDs, and then a number of entrepreneurs. Well, that would sort of make sense. Like, if you were trying to find someone who, you're naturally endeared to. For me, I'm a, math and science, kind of education,
Hmm.
computer science specifically. I've been hacking around and building software for 30 years. Uh, you know, uh, Deeply analytical. Very, very rarely make decisions with emotions. Highly practical, but also very entrepreneurial. Right. So,
Yeah.
okay, well, who are my Myers Briggs, perfect match clients? They're going to be
Right.
people who see the world the same way. And I think, no AI system is going to be, able to do that at the same degree as a human. And people are going to want to have people, they just going to want to have those people have the ability to, to do some of the amazing things technology can do while having like that human guide. So I'm very bullish on, human advisors. But I'm very scared for, uh, you know, the ones who are, sort of like, yeah, if they're really really slow to adopt, I think they're going to have a hard time, and
Yeah.
rightfully so. Their clients would probably be better off elsewhere.
Well, I'll come at it from a different angle. I think that the way that you structure your business, you have an option, you have a choice, and if you intentionally structure your business and you custody at a place that is not competing against you, that respects you, and is only interested in your success, that creates what I talked about earlier, that alignment. And I think the clients gravitate towards that and they respect that. And if you don't have that, then you're still coming from the old world of kind of being conflicted in one way or another. And I think that people will kind of seek out those that are authentic, that have that intention, that businesses intentionally set up in a certain way, because people are going to live longer. And if I listened to Rick Edelman, and he was saying that, longevity is a real thing, and you could be really healthy in your 90s, and you're making sure that you don't run out of your money is really, it's already important, but it becomes critically important, to going forward. And who are you going to trust to do that? Someone that really cares about you, that has, made that intention already, or someone that's working for someone else. And I feel like there's going to be that pressure in a couple of years on those people that aren't doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're dead right. And I think even just, I think that socially, that's the direction we've already been trending for quite a while. So if we think about where, um, like using longevity as an example, like if someone's really into longevity, right, that probably means they're on social media and they're probably following, Huberman and Peter Attia and whatever, right? Like there's a group of people like
certain
Brian
demographic.
Johnson, yeah, right. But what's interesting is that I just rattled off 3 names of people. All right, I didn't rattle off like, oh, if you're into longevity, then you're definitely following the, Galaxy Federation of Longevity Association or whatever, right? Like, or some company, like you're following people, right? Like you're endeared to other people who are championing that same cause. The same exact thing happens with personal finance. If we look at young people, they're not like following a big financial institution. Like, they don't care what JP Morgan says or is doing. But if there's somebody that they feel like they're connected to, they've connected through them digitally through social media, and they say, hey, you should buy Bitcoin, then like these young people are out there buying Bitcoin, right? Or whatever it might be. And this is a for better or worse thing, but it just goes in to show that like over the next 30 or 40 years, the one-to-one connection with somebody that like, and trust is going to be incredibly important, because we're seeing people move further and further away from corporations and closer to kind of people and personalities. Again, I don't know if that's always a good thing, but that's just the reality of the current trajectory.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to respect your time, and we're going to cut it right there. I think that as your name clearly states, Altruist is for helping people without hurting them, and I'm just so proud to be a part of it, and I'm really looking forward to what the next few years have and beyond that. So again, thank you for being here, and thanks for building Altruist for advisors like me.
It's an honor and a privilege, and so thank you. Thanks for having me on, having a really kind of fun conversation. Rarely do I get to nerd out and go deep into connectors on NCT and stuff like that. So this has been a real joy. And thank you to everyone who's listening to like this. Tom and I are N of 2 that are in love with helping people do better with their money. We'd love it to be N of millions, right? That are focused on helping people do better with their money. So thanks a ton.
Thank you for listening to Behind the Curtain Finance. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit our website at www.manettawealth.com or give us a call at 415-640-2121. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Manetta Wealth. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Copyright 2025. This content, which contains security-related opinions and/or information, is provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon in any manner as professional advice or as an endorsement of any practices, products, or services. There can be no guarantees or assurances that the views expressed here will be applicable for any particular facts or circumstances and should not be relied upon in any manner. You should consult your own advisors as to legal, business, tax, and other related matters concerning any investment. The commentary in this post, including any related blog, podcasts, videos, and social media, reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of the Manetta Wealth Management employees providing such comments and should not be regarded as the views of Manetta Wealth Management LLC or its respective affiliates, or as a description of advisory services provided by Manetta Wealth Management or performance returns of any Manetta Wealth Management investments client. References to any securities or digital assets or performance data are for illustrative purposes only and do not constitute an investment recommendation or offer to provide investment advisory services. Charts and graphs provided within are for informational purposes solely and should not be relied upon when making any investment decision. Past performance is not indicative of future results. The content speaks only as of the date indicated. Any projections, estimates, forecasts, targets, prospects, and/or opinions expressed in these materials are subject to change without notice and may differ or be contrary to opinions expressed by others.